Well, I think that I've been warning for decades now that the way a government falls, when you're in these Ponzi schemes, that they're always borrowing year after year with no intention of ever paying anything off. So the debt crisis comes when you can't sell the new debt to pay off the old. And we're starting to see that in Europe. I've been warning about. We have the IMF and France, on the verge of having asked for IMF loans. That is indicative of the fact that they can't sell the debt. Why would you go to the IMF if you didn't have to? All right, this is the whole problem, and Germany's not far behind. This is part of what I've been warning about, that Europe, this is why they want war. And I've been trying to articulate it, that they have a choice. I mean, either people are going to be storming the parliaments with their pitchforks, because their pensions are gone and everything else, or, it's you need an external enemy. I mean, even when Biden put on the sanctions on Russia and gasoline prices went up, what did he say? Oh, it's Putin's inflation. They always have to blame somebody else. They never take responsibility for anything. So that's really what Europe is trying to do. And the unrealistic nonsense that I've heard, and they even call Macron, sources in Paris, they call Macron the petite Napoleon. That they really think that they can conquer Russia. And they listen to the nonsense from the neocons and the Institute for Study of War, which is Victoria Nuland's sister-in-law's operation. Oh, Russia's weak. We can take them. So when you keep putting that sort of propaganda out, these people are desperate, and they really think that their way out is to conquer Russia, which has got 75 trillion in natural resource, and then that's twice the size of the United States, and we can rise again like the Roman Empire. No, you're going to go in the gutter like the Roman Empire, but look, Julius Caesar said over 2,000 years ago, people believe what they want to believe. And that's, nothing's changed. That's humanity. And all these people, these heads of state, every one of them is just, against Russia all the time. Oh, and they just keep promoting war. I had one source that was a delegate and paid, at the Vienna Peace Conference, and he called me after it ended. He says, this has got nothing to do with peace anymore. Everybody's talking about, drafting and stuff like that. You would think logically that Europe would have, learned its lesson from World War I and II, but nobody ever consults history. I mean, that's why history repeats. It's humanity making the same stupid mistakes every time. And it was Bismarck, who was Chancellor of Germany in 1888, and you can look this up. He came out and he said Europe's going to be engulfed in a war, and it's going to come from the Balkans. It was absolutely correct, and it's still coming from there. When they came to me, informing the euro, and I warned them that their structure was not going to work. But they asked me a lot of questions. I told them, I said, you really don't know what made America great. And they said, what? I said, discrimination. He said, oh, how could you say that? I said, because it was fair. Whoever was the last off the boat was discriminated against until they spoke English to get a job. said, so today you ask an American, what are they? They go, oh, I'm half Irish, half German, or half Italian, or whatever. I said, you don't see that here in Europe. The language keeps everybody separate. And, I got called in when Yugoslavia, before that fell apart. And, when the Balkans are just, it's an area that was conquered by the Ottoman Empire. So you have Muslims that then moved in. Then you have, Orthodox Christianity, and then you have Western Christianity. On top of that, you've got all kinds of ethnical differences. The Armenians are, a lot of them really fear them. Even Russian mafia fear the Armenian mafia. Historically, the law was different in Athens versus what we had in the West. If I killed somebody in your family, you had a right to kill anybody in mine if you couldn't get to me. So it was more like a family feud. Like Hatfields and McCoys we hear about. So that has been the code of Armenia. So all the other mafia organizations, Russian, Italian, if you did something to them, they're going to kill you and send flowers to your wife. Armenians, they're going to kill you, the wife, the kids, and the dog, because they don't want any retaliation. So you get into these things, and I went to Yugoslavia, and they're like, well, you don't know what they did to us. They killed 600 of us and threw us in a common grave. And I'm thinking I missed something in the news, I was, oh my God, really? I said, when did that happen? Oh, about 700 years ago. The resentment is always there. Like I've said on a few podcasts, that you can look it up. We gave, Greece like a handful of jets, and what did they, front page news. Oh, now we can attack Turkey with a sneak attack. I mean, the hatred between Greeks and Turks go back to Alexander the Great. So, I mean, I don't see this getting any better. They won't reform. The best we could possibly hope is that the EU completely collapses before they get a chance to do war.
And do you see that happening? I mean, do you see, because you have such a debt crisis with a lot of these countries, on top of, all the other terrible things that are happening in Europe, do you see Europe spiraling into something like that, of a collapse? And what's it look like if the EU does collapse?
Probably by next year, yes. Our computer has a panic cycle in the euro, but also in war. I had discussions with some people in D.C., and I was warning that, look, if I'm Putin, there's no way I'm agreeing to a ceasefire. Why? Because I know Europeans. They're just going to use that time to rebuild the army for Ukraine. And that's why Putin basically said, no, he wants a lasting peace, period. Not ceasefire. Because you can't trust these people. There was the Minsk agreement, and that the Donbass was supposed to be able to vote and separate, etc. There wouldn't have been a war if they carried that out. And then you have Merkel actually stand up and said, well, we didn't really intend that. We were just buying time for Ukraine to build an army. And she said that to the press. I was like, what? That's why you had the meeting in Alaska just between Putin and Trump. The reason Trump understands that Europe has no right to a table, seat at the table. Why should Putin even trust anything they say? he had another peace deal, and it made the front pages of Ukraine. Boris Johnson hopped on a plane, went there, and told Zelensky he wasn't allowed to sign it. Ukrainians that I know, basically, I feel bad for them because they really say, are we even allowed to have peace? Do we make any decisions on our own country? It's Zelensky who won't allow elections, and he takes orders from NATO, London, and you even have Boris Johnson publicly state, and it made the front pages of Norway newspapers. We are in a proxy war with Russia.
Ladies and gentlemen, our world is being poisoned. Every day we're exposed to more chemicals sprayed into our skies, leaching into our food, and polluting our air and water. From pesticides and heavy metals to hormone disruptors and to synthetic additives, these toxins are bombarding our bodies and silently destroying our health. But there's something you can do to fight back, and it starts in your gut. Kimchi 1 from Bright Core Nutrition contains over 900 strains of beneficial probiotics that will help flush toxins, restore gut balance, and support your immune system. Because when your gut is strong, your body can resist. You'll feel the difference. Better digestion, more energy, clearer thinking, stronger immunity, and even improvements in your skin, hair, and metabolism. And this isn't just hype. Studies show that fermented foods like kimchi can reduce the risk of obesity, improve blood sugar, and support whole body wellness. Kimchi 1 is all natural, non-GMO, dairy-free, gluten-free, and 100% made in the USA by a company that actually cares about your health. And today, you can get an exclusive offer just for my viewers. 25% off with your code MANINAMERICA by clicking the link below. Or call my friends at Brightcore for up to 50% off your order and free shipping. So give them a call now at 888-575-6488, and their educated staff will make sure that Kimchi 1 is right for you. Again, that's 888-575-6488. All the links and information are in the description below.
Now, Russia is well aware that it's not at war with Ukraine. This is a war with NATO. You had Kalis, the Chinese minister was there, and she started telling him, you have to tell Russia basically to surrender, get out, and accept our terms, whatever. And sources that I had that were there said that he got very angry. And he told her, we are not prepared to allow Russia to lose. Why? And he said right to her face, because we know we would be next. This is the attitudes there. You had Kalis actually publicly say, we put her videos online. Russia's too big, should be broken up. This is peace. How do you negotiate? Europe's, and she has articulated it very well. They're not interested in beating Russia just to push it out of Ukraine. They want to destroy it. Conquer it. That's why they call Macron the petite Napoleon. It's, the third time Hitler tried, Napoleon tried. You think the third time's going to be a charm? The excuses I've heard is that, he will never go nuclear because he knows it will blow back on him. Okay, fine. We come right back to that same thing. They believe what they want to believe. Nuclear weapons were supposed to be, the great deterrent to prevent war. They don't anymore. I'll never use them. That's okay. If he does, we'll do the same. Yeah, they don't care. I don't know. They've been indoctrinated by Bill Gates, and we got to reduce the population as well, or something.
Yeah, maybe that's it. But so, kind of tying us back into America, though, as we're watching this, and obviously, I think that Ukraine was much more of a proxy war under Biden. I do think that that Trump is trying to make some changes there. But then, looking at just life here in America, and looking at the overall global economic situation, and this is something that you understand very well, but inflation, Trump's trying to get the rates down, and they're kind of battling inflation. They're saying, oh, the inflation staying steady at a couple percent. There's almost nothing in my life that I look at that's only a couple of percent more expensive than it was a year ago. Energy costs, food costs, entertainment costs, vehicle costs, insurance costs, everything is getting more expensive. And I think a lot of Americans are thinking, okay, well, what is the golden age that we're supposed to be living under? But you also look at how there really hasn't been much effort to reduce government spending. Okay, we had Doge clean out some things, but we're also signing these massive bills and massive expenditures and expansion. Now we have the U.S. government taking ownership in private companies, 10% ownership in Intel, getting into owning some of the patents from the universities. So, for the American people that are struggling to get by, day by day, and hearing things about lowering rates and we're going to bring inflation down, what's the reality? Like, where do you see America headed on its current trajectory with the amount of debt that we have?
Well, we have a global debt problem, and we're in this Ponzi scheme, not just the United States, everybody. All right, and they just issued new debt year after year to pay off the old. And historically, whenever you're in this type of a Ponzi scheme, eventually what happens is you can't sell new debt to pay off the old. You can look up the city of Mainz and in the 14th century, they were doing the same thing there. They were raising taxes like crazy. That's where the Gutenberg press was invented. All right, so politicians thought, just like Detroit, Detroit went bust in 1937, raising taxes. They thought the auto boom would never end. And so they start borrowing effectively against future revenue. Spain did the same thing. Spain ended up as a serial defaulter 7 times. We got a ship coming in with all this gold, so we'll borrow against it before it's even there. And then 1715, the whole fleet sunk, they always do the same thing. And it doesn't matter. They don't consult history ever. It's just every time there's a financial crisis and somebody comes up with it, oh, we should do this. You'll never see even the press ask, has this been tried before? Did it work? Simple question. Nobody in government asks it, and nobody in the press asks it. So, Trump can be at war with Powell, and he can replace him, and that's fine. All right. Does it mean anything? Zero. All right. Powell is actually correct, and you get all these nonsense. He's behind the curve. He should have lowered this, that, as if this thing can keep going forever. He knows, one, interest rates always rise during war. This is why UK, France are getting into trouble. They're idiots. You can't be beating the war drums and then trying to sell debt. You go into war, interest rates go up. I mean, you can look it up. What White House and the Treasury basically imposed a form of quantitative easing on the Fed during World War II. They said if interest rates went above this price, you had to buy the debt to make sure that rates didn't go higher for them. Then they tried to do the same thing for 1951 for the Korean War, and the Fed said no, we're done. And there is, made the headlines, etc., and they refused to follow because they are independent. All right. So once you start down this path, all right, then you really are jeopardizing the credibility of everything behind it. Powell has kept rates, and you get these people looking at domestic numbers. No, it's international. He knows as we go into war, inflation rises. But this is a complicated situation. First, we had COVID. All right. I had farmers emailing me. They had to kill like 30,000 chickens. Why? Because they couldn't trucks weren't allowed to come, so they couldn't buy food for them, and they couldn't send them to market. Then you have these idiots that say, egg prices are up because of, these are greedy people. No, you had them killing chickens, you idiot. Those in government never take responsibility. This is the problem in Germany. First they did the COVID lockdowns. Then they put the climate change nonsense on them. Then you put the sanctions on Russia. The economy in Germany, which is 25%, is the cornerstone of the EU, has actually shrunk by 3%. You probably saw, videos, tens of thousands of people protesting at Volkswagen. Oh, you can't make gasoline cars anymore, they're going to be electric. They don't understand the implications of what they have done. And they don't care. It's, okay, that sounds good on TV, so I'll just say that. Here in Florida, we had one politician running, and we get red tides in the Gulf. Oh, and so what do? They blame it's chemicals from farmers. And she says, vote for me, and I'll make sure there'll never be a red tide again. I just Googled it. First one reported 1642 by the Spanish. I don't think there are any farmers. I don't think there are any chemicals here. But this is the problem. It's a sound bite, and they don't care. All right, Trump is. I agree with him on a lot of stuff. I disagree with him on a lot of other stuff. All right, it's. I think he's done okay on the tariffs. When you're putting in like 200%, that's to force them to negotiate. All right, so the EU has just come out and said, okay, they'll drop all the tariffs. You have no idea the restrictions that Europe was the worst. You can't sell California champagne because it can only be called champagne if it comes from the province of Champagne. Stuff like this. They were outlawing all kinds of fertilizers for climate change. Then, if your food was grown with that, it might be legal in the United States, you can't sell it to us. Stuff like that. So it's not necessarily just tariffs. There's all kinds of restrictions and things of this nature. So the combination of COVID and the climate change stuff, that has set in motion rising prices. Right. What our computer's been showing, and I've been warning about, that while the economy's going down into 2028 globally, right, we're looking at stagflation, so rising prices. Right. You have it's more like the 70s, where we saw stagflation because OPEC raised the price of oil, and that increased the cost of everything. But at the same time, we were going into an economic recession. So they call this stagflation, where the inflation rate is higher than the economic growth.
So stagflation is worse than inflation because stagflation is things are getting more expensive, people are making less money.
And the economy is going down in general. Our computer's been showing that Europe is most likely going into a depression into 2028, whereas we are more in line for a recession. And our biggest danger is largely the press is so anti-Trump. To give you an idea, that in the 1932 election, that's where this nonsense of tariffs came from. In the election, they were blaming the Great Depression on tariffs. Why? Because Smoot and Hawley were both Republicans. Oh, the Republicans and that's what caused the Great Depression. First of all, the tariffs didn't come in until basically the summer of 1930. The market was already down big time. All right. Then you had the sovereign defaults in 1931. This had nothing to do with tariffs. There isn't one respectable economist that ever commented that the Great Depression had anything to do with tariffs. But, it was it was a bullet point for the 32 election to get FDR in. So then you hear people, tariffs, that's going to be bad. So you had all these people predicting that, Trump's tariffs were going to be, it didn't work, did it? They don't do the research, and most of it is just sound bites and propaganda. And my concern is that, again, they'll do the same thing. Blame this recession, on Trump's tariffs, or this or that, when this is a global contraction, and the real problem is the debt. Now, to show you even more, you had the Biden administration really torpedoed the U.S. economy. One, you have Lincoln put in the sanctions against Russia. Gasoline prices went up and everything else, fine. But he had the audacity then to tell China, if you help Russia, we'll do the same to you. Do you understand that China was the biggest holder of U.S. debt? So then they start dumping. You're threatening them with war, but then you say, want to buy some bonds? This is what I mean about these neocons, etc. And most of the other people, they're very myopic. They only look at that one thing. Look at Iraq. We just got to take out Saddam Hussein. Did anybody consider what comes after? No. ISIS chopping off people's heads. You got Tony Blair's apology. It's on YouTube. And he said, we thought we were freeing the people from Saddam Hussein. We didn't realize we were subjecting them to more sectarian violence. They never look at what comes next. Never. All right. This stuff with Russia and Ukraine. All right. What happened? Do you realize that you're actually talking about the conquest of Russia, not just winning this war in Ukraine? If somebody's going to break in your house and you got a gun, you're going to push the button. Simple as that. So the debt problem we have is very, very serious. And we're approaching what we've been warning about is a sovereign debt crisis. when Greece needed an IMF bailout in 2010, the traders, everybody made a fortune shorting Greece. And then what happened? They go, oh, who's next? Oh, Spain, France, Italy. It's a contagion. They start looking around, right? France is in trouble now. The government may collapse. That undermines the entire euro. The traders then look, oh, who's next? Just look at the 30-year rates on German bonds. They're going up to record highs. The confidence in Germany as being the bulwark. Go on. You got Merz, pushing for deficit. Oh, now you have the German economy actually shrinking by 3%. Then you have these neocons at NATO saying, oh, we want 5% of your GDP to prepare for war. So that's 5 plus you're at 8%, just there. Negative. You're going into a depression. Everybody just looks out after their own self-interest. They don't consider anything that we're all connected or anything of that nature. Then you have these people pushing, oh, the dollar, de-dollarization. Really? Okay. You want euro? I'm telling you, that's going in the trash can. All right. What's next? Oh, you want to own rubles? Yuan? I still have some, Indian notes that are being canceled from the last time I was there. Look at the debt level of Brazil. It's one of the worst. All right, and then you go, oh, BRICS is going to go, really? First of all, if you did a gold-back currency, that's deflationary. We have to change the political system first. That's what brought Bretton Woods down. Fine, at a fixed exchange rate, gold at $35, but you didn't limit the amount of dollars you're creating. Come on, 3-year-old with a pocket calculator could figure out it's going to bust. We're not talking about Nobel Prize winning stuff here. All right? And you get all these people, we'll go back to a gold standard. Really? Do you understand what you're even saying? They don't at all. They want, gold standard, but then they want their house to go up and they want to raise. How do you get those two if money doesn't move?
So does going back to a gold standard, is that basically, in essence, just wipe out all the fiat currencies because those can only exist without some sort of commodity basis for their money printing?
It's irrelevant what that is. The problem is the political system. If I'm going to run for office, vote for me, I'll give you a lollipop and a free car. How do I pay for that under a gold standard? You need the floating exchange rate. It can't be that. That's why we're in this perpetual debt crisis. They issue more money, they issue more debt to pay for that lollipop in the car.
So it's not just a sovereign debt crisis facing a single country, it's just the entire world is caught up in this debt Ponzi scheme. And it's like a balloon it only has an in valve. You can't pull the air back out. All you can do is keep blowing and blowing and blowing until one day the whole thing just blows up.
Right, that's what our computer's showing for 2032. Okay, republics will fall. This is unsustainable. You're starting to see the cracks there in Europe. Because of what Blinken did and threatened China. All right, so then China started dumping $50 billion at a clip of U.S. debt. All right. And then you get these people that blame the central bank. I'm sorry. Take a look. Probably AI will even answer it, all right? the amount of money the Federal Reserve creates is minimal. What happens is today, the bulk of the money is created by the debt because it's just debt money that pays interest. Before 1971 and back in the 60s, this is where the people's, their theories are antiquated and they haven't looked at them. If I had $100 E-bond in the 60s and I went to the bank and said, gee, can I borrow $50 against it? It was illegal. So that's where it came up. It's cheaper to print, less inflationary to basically to borrow than to print. Because you're taking money out of the system. You're not increasing the system. However, after Brent Woods, I want to trade gold futures, you can post T-bills. Debt is now money that just pays interest.
I see. So it's interesting because it's easy to have this mentality that you've got Jerome Powell at the Fed just pressing the red print button, and that's just spitting out dollars like an automatic rifle, just burn, the press is running and dollars spraying everywhere. But actually, what you're saying is that the real issue is, it's the debt and then the derivatives tied to the debt, right? It's this massive debt sold on top of debt, sold on top of debt. It's like you've buried yourself under a mountain of debt, and there's no way out.
When Ronald Reagan was president, the national debt was $1 trillion. We are now spending $1 trillion in interest. This has got nothing to do with the Federal Reserve. Then, if China owned 10%, so we're sending $100 billion of $1 trillion to China. It doesn't even stimulate the domestic economy anymore. See, all these theories that people just assume, and they're not looking at them anymore, go all from the Great Depression. Keynes. If we raise interest rates, lower interest rates, we can manipulate society. Very nice. U.S. had a balanced budget back then. So, in theory, his idea may have quasi-worked. Okay? Today, the government's the biggest borrower. You raise interest rates, the government spends more. If you raise interest rates and say, does the government ever say, oh, gee, the Fed wants us to spend less? Not going to happen. See, all these theories that people just assume, blaming the Fed, whatever, you're blaming the wrong guy. You're blaming the guy, it's the bullet rather than the guy that actually pulled the trigger. It's the bullet that was responsible, not him.
And so, looking at the situation and thinking, maybe if we can, get rates back down and stimulate the economy and trying to fix things, it's almost like I'm kind of struggling for the right metaphor, but it's almost like you have a cancer that has you have a patient that has cancer in every organ, in every bone, and the whole body is just so far past the ability to be saved. But you're trying to say, well, if we get some sunlight and put some Band-Aids on over here, we'll be good again. It's like, no, the whole system is on its deathbed, right?
That's what we're facing, and you're beginning to see the stress of that.
I see. So the price is going up. What happened in COVID, all of these things are symptoms of a much, much, much larger problem that's facing the entire world right now. It's a fact that the entire world is under a mountain of debt that only is increasing, that now the payments on the debt are more than a lot of countries' GDP, and there's no way out except for the entire system to kind of blow up, basically.
This is why Europe's looking at war. And look, it's not sustainable. It's just not sustainable. But we have to look. Russia and China under communism, it collapsed because it was just not efficient.
Every collapse is the same. The warning signs are ignored because the market keeps going up. But then a sudden and unexpected crash. Ordinary people often lose everything. But the elites who pulled out early, they buy the world back for cheap. That's the pattern, and it will repeat. The only way to break free is to step out of their game before it even starts. That's why I hold physical gold and silver, real assets in my possession immune to their manipulations. When the reset comes, metals will still have value. Paper and digital numbers won't. So picture yourself as that first wave hits. Do you want to be running for cover or sitting in a position of strength? Make that choice today. Go to goldwithseth.com to get your free guide or call Noble Gold at 877-646-5347. History favors the prepared, and right now, that can be you.
And I think this is why the neocons are so pissed off, because it collapsed all by itself and they didn't get to shoot anybody, you know? As you know, when China, I was called in and I was actually helping China become capitalist. And they had taken me to this room and they were actually monitoring everything in the country, but they were not interfering. And there were 249 varieties of tea. And I'm answering questions that are, to me, were kindergarten level. It's like, well, why is this one tea selling for like $1 here but $5 there? I said, well, where does it come from? Here. I said, well, first you have transportation costs. They go, oh, yeah. And I said, somebody will pay more for this one if they like this version versus that one. Really? Now, we had a Russian girl who was a programmer for us for a while. And it was interesting because she had come to migrate to the United States. And to listen to her, she said her biggest dilemma is when she went shopping. I said, really? Why? She says, because over there, I wanted toilet paper, there was only one brand. That was it. Here, I got to make a decision on everything. Do I want this one or that one? What's the difference between, this was communism. And what I was explaining there in China was basic, to me, kindergarten level capitalism. Explaining human nature. I like this one more than that one, so I want this one. And it was like, oh, okay. I was impressed that they weren't interfering. But, that's the level of teaching that I was doing in China. I mean, it's like kindergarten, first grade, whatever. But, it was interesting because then I could see why, communism collapsed. Because tea that was $1 here, and it was $5 over there. Under communism, it still had to be $1, even if it cost you $10 to get it there. That's why communism collapsed. We are going through this. We're just basically light beer. It's Marx, light version of Marxism. That we think we're capitalists and free. We're not. It's like, vote for me and I'll give you this. I'll take care of you. Even if you look socially. Before the Great Depression, the guy would often be twice the age of his wife. Why? Because first he had to go get the house to farm the chickens, then go to you and say, I want to marry your daughter. And you would say, what do you got? Can you afford it? All right. So you had to prove yourself first. After socialism started, I want to marry your daughter. What do you got? I don't know. We're just going to start life together, maybe live in the field of daisies, whatever. There's always socialism. There's always welfare if we can't make it. You lost that. That's why I think also the divorce rates went up crazy. They say most of them, the divorces are over money. But that was the big difference. So it changed us even socially. And before, there were, people, they saved to take care of their parents. So you would often have a number of kids. That was your retirement. Then Social Security comes in and the rest of it. How many kids save to take care of their parents today? Most of them, the statistics are showing they're still in their 30s and they're living at home off their parents.
Yeah. Gosh, so all these symptoms, whether it's the debt crisis, but even what you're getting in now, the social issues, just all this. I mean, when I look at it from the big picture, it's just not to be morbid or doomsday, but we're at the end of an empire. Or the American empire, as we know it, it's at its end cycle. Not to say that we're all going to die in an apocalypse, but the system is broken. It's been broken for a long time. It's been perpetually more and more broken. And now the more they try to fix it, the more they break it. And so the only thing is just the whole thing has to break, and we have to somehow start over again and hopefully get through that.
Yeah, you go through these things roughly every 300 years or so. The last time we overthrew monarchy. This time it's going to be republics, because they have corrupted themselves. If I want to run for Congress, I can tell you anything you want to hear. I'll save the whales. I'll make sure it doesn't rain on Sundays, whatever. And then I get to Washington, and there's a meeting the very first day. Congratulations, you're here. This is how it works. And just look at the votes. You're down party line. So I can say anything you want to hear. I get there. It's irrelevant. Forget the whales. And look at Europe. When they designed it, the European Parliament has no power to write a law. Zero. That's the only thing you can vote for. Ursula, go to work. She's never even stood for an election to be a dog catcher. Never elected to anything. The commission that makes all the laws, unelected people. Right? The Europeans have zero chance of overthrowing their government, from a democratic perspective.
Through the vote, yeah. I feel like even in America, there's no chance. We have no chance of changing anything through a vote in this country, unfortunately, at this stage.
Right. I mean, look, this is, look at what they did to RFK. All right? I warned them, what I had heard, they're not going to allow you on the ticket. Oh, come on, that's absurd. Well, they already had it picked. Camilla was going to be on the ticket, that's it, and there was going to be no primary. So they were doing the same thing. Then he had some sort of deep state person on his staff, I don't remember what her name was. We're going to run independently, you can win. I said, sorry, my computer says you don't stand it prayer in hell. And after the state of New York kicked him off the ticket independently, that's when he really moved over to Trump. And I had known, it didn't make a lot of news, but back in 2016 that there was an agreement between Trump and RFK that Trump was going to allow him to start a commission on vaccines. And all the pharmaceutical companies then threatened Congress that they would pull all their funding if that commission went through. That commission was shut down about 3 months before COVID. All right. I didn't get vaccinated. I didn't let my family get vaccinated. Why? Because I knew also Klaus Schwab, 3 months before, was making phone calls saying a virus is coming. I mean, all this stuff that was all for climate change. I mean, you can look on my site. There's a video, WEF, how great the lockdowns were. Tell us, they ended up pulling it because they got so much flack from it. But, the planet is cleaner now. This is what it was all about. And they succeeded. Okay? The vast majority, they created, work from home, Zoom calls, all this, all right? Office space is, got a commercial real estate, crisis. All of this was created by COVID. It was for climate change. It had nothing to do with any bullshit of a virus. All right. I had some respiratory thing. My daughter's maybe got, go test. I got tested 3 times and said negative. She finally said, look, you got to go to the Tampa hospital, see what the pulmonary guy says. I walked in, I said, look, I've been tested for COVID 3 times. It's not COVID. The head of pulmonary. You know what he said to me? We still think you had COVID. The tests are not valid. I mean, look, this is what they did with COVID. And it was all for climate change. Stop the commuting. They didn't want people going on. Then you had WEF pushing 15-minute cities. This is what this was about.
It was all for climate change, and climate change was just about the Trojan horse for global tyranny, like global technocracy under a centralized control.
This stuff. Then you get, the World Health Organization wanting dictatorial powers to declare whatever they want to declare and lockdowns and whatever. It's all for climate. Total nonsense. And this is what we're dealing with. The whole climate change thing is, again, people that have no clue. It's warmer this year than when I was a kid, so therefore we're causing it. It's the same thing with the politician over here. Red tide is caused by the farmers and with chemicals. The climate has always changed. I hate that
everything's cyclical. It gets hotter for a while, then it gets colder for a while. Look,
you had all the sea peoples. You can look up the book 11. I think it was 1177 BC. They invaded the South. Climate change. It was freezing up there. Why did Attila the Hun move into Europe? Asia went into a major drought, so you leave. Climate has driven, people and civilizations and migrations and whatever. It all have always taken place. You don't pick up and move someplace unless you really have to. Simple as that. If I can, got a nice piece of ground here, I can, plant my food, then why do you leave? The whole thing that started the Enlightenment period. Look it up. They found, woolly mammoths completely frozen in the tundra up there in Siberia, still with plants in their mouth and stomach. So how are they suddenly completely frozen? That started the period of enlightenment, encyclical, and looking at things of this nature. They were all starting involved in that. How could this happen? Before then, it was this idea of linear idea. The world's always the same every day. All of a sudden, ice ages, cooling, warming periods, that started the whole Enlightenment period. I mean, you can look it up. I mean, they found woolly mammoths. I mean, frozen. I think the first one that they discovered was a woolly rhinoceros. It's in a museum today, completely frozen. How does something, but you're just eating lunch and that's it? You're frozen like that? So, look, there's a lot of different things of this nature, and there are maps that showed Antarctica, the coastline of Antarctica, from the 15th century. How did that happen? How could they chart it if it was all iced? Now they're starting to find out there were forests underneath there. They're digging it, and like, oh, how about that? Complete rainforest underneath the ice? Look, this is the way the planet is. It's always been the poles have shifted. We know from geology because where the poles were, because when a volcano erupts, the magma, when it cools, is magnetized to pointing to where the North Pole is. So we know it was over Hawaii at one point. I mean, these things move. It's not always the same every day. Sorry.
It just seems like you have these big moves, these big shifts, things settle for a while, there's some sort of consistency, maybe a little bit of stability, until the shift starts to emerge again. And this is what, it just seems like that's where we're at. I mean, you could say that it's a global debt crisis, but I think it's much bigger than that. I think there's a lot of discussion of the pole shifting, right? Heading into 2027, 2030, a lot of people are talking about that there's some larger events that are on the horizon, and that a lot of the behavior that we see from these so-called elites right now is reflective of them understanding that something is coming, and they're scrambling because they know they're not in control of it. They're trying to gain control amidst the chaos, but there's much larger forces at work here.
Yeah, look, I mean, the current in the Atlantic is starting to shift. You also have, the number of volcanoes and earthquakes in around the Pacific Rim are rising dramatically. I was on the phone the other day. They believe that the supervolcano, which is the Bay of Naples, is starting to become active again. Look, everything has a cycle to it. Correlations on that, when you go into solar minimum, there's an increase in gamma rays. And the theory is that a gamma ray is kind of like an X-ray type thing. It penetrates the surface of the Earth. So they're thinking that maybe when you go into these periods of solar minimum, the gamma rays might activate, earthquakes or volcanoes. I mean, nobody knows for sure, but all this stuff is definitely cyclical. I mean, there's a book called The Year Without a Summer, 1816, when I think it was Krakatoa that erupted. And they throw so much ash up into the air that it was snowing in New York City in July. The same thing happened in the Byzantine Empire in around 561. And historians back there writing that they hadn't seen the sun, for weeks and months. Crop failures. When you correlate it out, that's also when disease comes, because people have malnutrition, etc. And then your plagues follow that. I mean, even you look at Crimea. Our computer was able to predict, where. You can Google it up. In 2013, I put out the computer saying it's going to start in Ukraine. And how does it pick it? the area year in advance. It's because Crimea has been fought over constantly since ancient times. All right, the Black Plague came from there. The Asians came in, the Mongols came in. They brought, you can read about it. There was an Italian fort there, and they started catapulting in the people that died from the plague. Scared the Italians. They fled Crimea, took the Black Plague back with them to Italy, and then it wiped out about 50% of the population of Europe. I mean, look, the history is interesting when you look at a lot of this stuff. But you gotta look. If you look, you begin to see history does repeat because humanity never looks at it, and we repeat the same mistakes over and over and over again.
Unfortunately.
Look, those in power and government, we are facing a sovereign debt crisis globally. Japan is one of the highest debt to GDP ratios. When you pick up the rug and you really look at Japan, you'll see that who owns the U.S. debt? It's the private corporations that bought the U.S. debt as a hedge against their own government. Japan, the government itself, buys its own debt because it can't sell it. Okay, there was one statement I thought was really absurd, but they came out and they bragged that the government bought 90% of the auction. You think that was a good thing? You can't sell it. All right. Brazil, same kind of problems. I mean, when our computer is showing World War for 2026, it's not like World War I and II in the sense that it's an alien group against another group. This is it's worldwide. So you're seeing conflicts in India, Pakistan, Thailand, Cambodia. You're looking at China, Taiwan, North Korea, South Korea, Russian, ships in the Sea of Japan, and Japan, getting all flustered over that. Throughout the Balkans, it's Middle East. It's everywhere. It's not just one spot. And by putting in all the data in our computer, it's taught me a lot. And what it shows is that it correlates absolutely everything. Climate, war, you name it. It's doing everything. And the interesting thing is that, for example, when Rome overthrew its Tarquin king and Republic was born in 509 BC, within 6 months, Athens is overthrowing his tyrants and democracy is born. Oh, that's a good idea. American Revolution. Okay, fine. George Washington's being sworn in, 1789. French go, that's a good idea. French Revolution, 1789. Tiananmen Square happens. 2 months later, what happens? Berlin Wall falls. 1848. Dispute in Sicily. Oh, that's a good idea. Spreads throughout all of Europe. French government's overthrown. The German flag today is the flag of the revolutionaries, not the previous. All those flags with 3 stripes, they were the revolutions of 1848. So it becomes a contagion. It's almost like a flu or something. It's and if you look deeply, you'll see, for example, Cambodia and Thailand. It was this goes back to, border disputes. Even the last time was 1987. So it's wherever old grudges are, India, Pakistan split, they're not healed. It's like, oh, it's them again. It's just the way it is. I know people in Serbia and they still hate Armenians. All right, it's not going to go away. We have employees in Ukraine, one in Kiev and one in Donetsk. We didn't even talk to each other. And we had a conference in Greece, and the one from Kiev refused to go back the quickest way because the plane stopped in Moscow. Went off to Spain, someplace else, to get home to Kiev. The hatreds are systemic. I don't see you getting rid of them. You look at the Middle East, Iran versus Israel. This is like one God against another God. Where's the negotiation here?
Yeah,
there
good
is.
Point.
It's so that's what I mean. It's different. It's what the computer is showing me is that this is more of a global conflict. It's wherever there were old grudges, you're seeing them resurface. Turkey, you had Erdogan lamenting over the fall of the Ottoman Empire. And when Israel was attacked, out there supporting all the Arabs, why? Because he wants to resurrect that. He said it so many times. And you got Greece, and I said when you handed them some, now we can do a sneak attack on Turkey. These things are, they're always going to hate each other. Simple as that. It's just, I don't think there's any solution. It's like, like I've said to you before, I knew Bill Kristol, whatever, new neocons. You can't talk to them. There is no convincing them that they're wrong. I argued with Kristol back in the 90s. If we take out Saddam Hussein, Assad out of Syria, and Gaddafi will bring peace to the Middle East. Really? I said, have you ever been there? It's tribal. They see themselves as Sunni, Shiite, Kurd. They don't see themselves as Iraqis or Syrians or, the dictators. First of all, we carved up the Ottoman Empire after World War. We're the ones that drew the borders. Same way as Khrushchev drew the border for Ukraine. Then they stuck in these dictators, and it needed a dictator. As long as there was a dictator there, he would prevent them from fighting each other. As soon as you remove Saddam Hussein, you even got Tony Blair saying we didn't realize we were subjecting him to more sectarian violence. This is just the way it is. It's
just the cycles of humanity and human nature and everything.
The Shiites believe the church should run the state. So you got the Ayatollah. And the Sunnis, no, you can have a king. This is, like Protestant, Catholic, Protestant Reformation. They still call Catholics papes in England. And that was 1649, the Civil War. In 1844, you can look it up, when the Irish were coming in, it turned into gun battles in Philadelphia. It was the Protestants against the Catholics